Okay, so another episode of Thanos Note, and today I have first my friend, and secondly a very well-respected professional, Beata Drezek. Beata has got over 25 years' experience in business and real estate. She has worked with some of the largest organizations in the world, such as the European Investment Bank, the European Commission, and the UK's largest developer, Barratt Homes. She's also a US Family Office ambassador with experience across large companies, such as New One Capital, completing transactions over $25 million at Barratt Homes. She's also an investor and property developer with BD Homes. She was also a broadcast journalist and a published author, the Polish-English Bilingual Visual Dictionary. Beata helps project owners secure project finances directly from private debt capital with no intermediaries, daisy chains, and associated distractions. Some of her projects range from $250 million to over $5 billion with no upper caps across real estate, hospitality, infrastructure, energy, mining, agriculture, and more, including technology, of course. Now, Beata, welcome.
Thank you so much, Alani, for this introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. And it's fantastic to have this opportunity to catch up with you.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I know it took a little bit of organizing, but, I'm super, super, super excited that we finally got to doing it.
It's all right. Not to worry.
That's awesome. So I'm going to jump right to it as we were talking about earlier. Your investment thesis is a lot more unique than most, given the very large transactions that you specialize in. And many of those transactions, I call it the unseen hand, because those are very, very sophisticated, complex type of deals. And we were sharing personal experiences earlier. Do you believe that most projects, most large cap projects, specifically infrastructure or otherwise, don't have a common non-financial trait? So when I say non-financial, what I mean is beyond the dollars and cents, right? Is there conviction? Cui bono, who benefits? What's the long-term sustainability? And does that take into account current and future market conditions?
I think it depends on the project and it depends on the project owners. I mean, some of the projects that we work with, we basically connect project owners for large projects directly with the private debt lender. So they are mostly looking at the projects from 250 million up to 5 billion or more. So just the numbers themselves, and it depends on the industry in which the project is. But if I look back at the last year, and the truth is that very few actually get through this rigorous due diligence of the lender, and very few meet the lender's lending criteria. I would say that looking at the projects, it really varies, because some of the projects and project owners are experienced. So that means that they've got some higher goal, and some are purely based on the business, and they're purely based on the numbers and making it work and the bottom line. And with the lender, it really does not matter that much, because, at the end of the day, they will look at the project as the private capital. They will look at the project. They will want to determine first things first, whether the project has got the collateral, or otherwise what we know as a down payment. It's on a similar basis to when you get your mortgage. And then they will look and dig deeper into, whether the project is actually going to be deliverable or not. But some of the projects, like we spoke before, the projects that, I call them kind of, the projects are not so much the passion projects, but the projects that are close to my heart. And these projects sometimes struggle, just like I gave you the example. There was this project which aims to put to the market and manufacture the cars, the vehicles for disabled persons. And like I said to you, from my personal perspective, that is just so hugely important. Because I grew up in clinics. When I was 6, I was diagnosed with scoliosis. So, you know, that my youth was just from clinic to clinic to clinic. And like I said before, you know, I still have this vivid image of this little girl running. So I was 6, maybe 7, and then she was running towards me and laughing and you know, basically a joy of life. And then I realized that, you know, that she basically didn't have any hands and she didn't have any legs. And so she was maybe 2, but still so full of life. So when I look at a project like this is so hugely important to me. That, you know, that I'm just going to push and push and push. And with the capital, they will look at numbers. That's just what it is. And the scrutiny criteria. And so, you know, at some point, you know, though I had a conversation because the project didn't have any collateral. Hopefully, they will get an investor who will be able to bring in the equity. But with the a lender that was just like, you know, you must really love those guys because, you know, you keep pushing for them, fighting for them. It's just, I said, well, it is, because that is where there's the human face of the project, where this particular project will serve many, because I've seen those 40 years ago, you know, how a human being can struggle with everyday activities. And it's just, you know, we don't realize how blessed we are that you have 2 hands, you have 2 legs, you can go everywhere, you know, you can walk there, you can cook your meal, you can just, you know, you can do these things for yourselves. But just imagine that little girl, you know, how does she answer the phone? So, you know, that brings me to another aspect that you mentioned before we went live. Was just like, you know, with the artificial intelligence, you know, these things, the command, and you can just, you know, one of the things that I really dreamt of when I was a little girl, because I really loved science fiction. So for me, it was just like, I had this dream that one day we will be able to have a video phone. And then boom. I mean, literally, you know, when I was reading all those fantastic adventures, I thought, you know, it would be so great to have this video phone. And now we have WhatsApp and all other medias and, you know, this call itself, right? Which is great because you can connect with people in such a way. So when I think about, you know, the projects like the cars for the disabled people, fantastic. And like, you know, the artificial intelligence that is changing the way, you know, Alexa, do this, do that. And, you know, you have so much help if you're in that position where you actually need help because you cannot do things yourself. I don't know. What do you reckon?
You know, that's a fascinating analysis, because first things first, dreams do come true. So what you dreamt about on the video phone, here we are. Every phone today is a video phone, 99% of phones at least. And on the other hand, you know, when you talked about the young girl with no arms running joyfully, you know, my question, I mean, I'm going to share with you my thoughts first, but I'm going to lead back to a question, which is, you don't miss what you never had. Because if she didn't have hands, yes, she was running joyfully, perhaps that's her reality, right? She never had it. So she naturally adapted to not having it so she can live her life, even though those of us that have our hands and legs can't imagine life without them. But she's living life without them. So she never had those things, so she doesn't miss them, and she's created her life around that. The same way, you know, humans, we speak different languages. And even if we speak different language, I mean, I've lived in 8 countries, been to over 46. And one thing across from India to Lima, Uruguay, Germany, we find ways to communicate. You know, so I'm looking at that going back to our earlier conversation, the home is the basis of everything. So we look at personal experiences around how we relate to each other and how naturally humans want to help each other. That's the one thing that I believe is always missing. Even if an investor, whether it's me looking at a project to invest in or vice versa, even if the answer is a no, it's not because there's hatred. The economics just don't make sense based on the information provided at the time. People genuinely mean well, but all of our theses are different. You invest based on your experiences, your interests, your capabilities, your expertise, among other things. And you've done this long enough to understand this is my thesis. This is where I am going to specialize and focus in. Another investor who might be from, say, San Mateo, California, may just like doing early stage investments, and they cut checks less than $20 million. It's got to meet certain criteria. And they don't do anything past Series A, for example. A capital project, for example, an investor might be, I'll say, land developer. And I've done a few of those where we'll buy, 500-600 acres and we'd level it, chop it up, put wells, fence it, and we turn it on, and turn it over to the next, a development company that they might want to put buildings, whatever it is. You don't play in that domain. So you stay in your lane. So everyone's thesis is very, very different. And that comes from experiences. My very first transaction as a human being, I think I was 8 or 9 years old. I had 3 bicycles.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 kids down the street. It was Ellensgrat off Prinsengracht in the Jordan district. And I had 3 bicycles, a BMX, a chopper, and I can't remember the third one. And there were a bunch of kids. 2 of them didn't have any bikes. They would borrow my bikes all the time. Half the time, my bikes were at their homes. And one of the kids went, "Hey, can you just sell me your bike?" And I go, "Yeah, give me 100 guilders." And he said, "Okay." I was shocked. Someone will pay me money for one of my 3 bikes, the one I liked the least. That was the moment I understood commerce.
Mm-hmm.
I have something of value that someone is willing to pay for. And that was the beginning of my journey.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you mentioned it, because it's a little bit like things that are important to me may not be important to another person. So that changes completely the perspective someone else is going to look at the same thing. So your bike, that was just, okay, I don't like it that much, but that was the treasure to somebody else. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Exactly. So that value, it wasn't obvious to me that he had wanted it all along,
Oh.
And now he bought it. Yeah, he would borrow it, and I'll have him just keep it at your house, just bring it back every Friday, because when my mom came back home, if your bike was missing, you had a lot of explaining to do. Yeah. So he bought the bike. So I ended up, funny enough, I ended up selling the second bike to another one of the kids, and then kept the bike that I liked, which was my BMX. And the 2 I didn't like, I sold off to people who liked it more than I. So value, 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 which leads me to my next question, which is, do you believe that a lot of companies and startups focus on the wrong things? So, for example, a lot of companies, startups in this case, they focus on the product. They build the solution to a problem that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then they go try to raise money.
Yes. I mean, yeah, well, to be honest, that I've seen a project like this, I've seen a proposal like this, and it's just it did not have the substance actually to justify. There was not the new angle to it. It was just like, and the ask was really, really large sum. of money, well above 1 billion. And then there was no justification. There was no substantiation in terms of, this is what it's going to do for the people. This is how it's going to change it. This is what we've done. That's the feedback we got from the people, from the market, that yes, they want it. And that is, I think it's just like kind of like doing things from the completely wrong side. It's exactly what you said. It's just like, starting at the wrong place. And I think when you look at the companies that are around and are thriving, and just some of those companies, it's just like, clients on demand. For example, these people that are trained with them. So, what they have done, they just basically ask the market, what is it that you want? And they identified the gap, what is needed that needs to be filled in. And with the demand, they created the product to fill in this demand, to fit in within this gap and just, basically contribute to it. And this allows a project to progress really quickly. If you don't have this, you will always struggle because you're trying to, it's a little bit like when you think about YouTube and YouTube algorithm, it's a little bit like, I want to show this to people, this. And so you keep posting, and you've got very little response. And then, when you actually study the algorithm, any algorithm, it's just, it's not designed for you to promote what you want. It's designed to find for people what they want. So in a sense, when I recall my PhD, working on my PhD, it was just, hammered again and again and again, give them what they want, tell them what you're going to give them, tell them what you are giving them, and then tell them what you've just given to them. But, you have to give them what they want in the form they want. And that's the same. It's just a little bit like, the algorithms are just based on the common human perception of things. It's just like when you go to the store and you see something and it's, oh, that's nice, but but you've got a shopping list. Yeah. You will this is your algorithm. You're just going to go with your shopping list. You're not going to go, oh, that's great. Yeah. Okay. But I really want to go and do my shopping list. Yeah. So it's a little bit like this. And I think from the pure common sense perspective, when you fill in the gap in the market, when you respond to the demand, you're actually contributing to the common good, to the bigger, in a bigger way. When you develop something, you think it's going to be great, who am I to say that it's not going to be great? Maybe it's going to be a hit. Maybe that's exactly what the market needs. But every business training that I've done, and every big names within the arena of the business will tell you the same thing, that you really need to respond to what market wants. So with the startups, I haven't had much opportunity to work with startups because that's not what the lender specializes in. They are really more looking at a bigger project. So, there might be a startup occasionally that they might be interested if one of the board members has interest in this particular arena. But, with their minimum level of 250 million, they are looking at the bigger things usually. So, something that is already advanced, or it can be just done completely from scratch, like building a housing estate, but still it's a different kettle of fish, like you said, kettle of tea. So really, I think it depends on heavily. And that's how we humans operate on it's probably the neuroscience that you're just going to go for the things that you need primarily. And then, like, for me personally, it's like, this is my must have. This would be nice have. That is great. Because I live a simple life. That's my preference. I do like it this way. And so, I think that kind of, if you were to look at the projects, that would be probably the same thing. If you just try to push something because you think it's going to be great, and you think, then it will probably be an uphill struggle, because most equity investors and most VC investors most likely are going to be looking at, okay, if I am to give you the capital, what is going to be my return, and how quickly can we get that money back, and how quickly can you make it happen? So they will be looking at this thing. Have you done? Are you filling in the gap? Do you have the market fit, in product market fit? Is it something that is going to, and how soon, how fast can you develop it? And these days it's just really about going to the market very quickly, because with all the technology that is surrounding us, it's kind of unavoidable. But yeah,
It is. That's very interesting, which leads me to my next subject, which is, do you think geopolitical considerations factor into these capital projects? So, for example, we know that investors like to put their money where there is a semblance, however imperfect, of the rule of law.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm saying, okay, Beata, I've got a $1.5 billion project, but it's in Venezuela, versus a $1.5 billion project
it's
in,
not going to
say,
happen. That's in the shortest way. That's I've had the pleasure of working with a few private debt lenders, and these are really large companies. The lender that I mostly with, and we mostly service now, they deployed 100 billion US dollars last year. They want to double this year. And each of those lenders, this particular lender, is very, very flexible in terms of, in terms of the location, but they will be looking at the political situation. And they will be looking at the economic situation. So they've got very strict criteria. But the other of the lenders, and this particular lender has been in around, I think they've been around for 40 years. So it's a massive, big company. And they have a list of locations where they are going to invest, including in Europe. So it's not going to be the whole Europe. So if you had a project, I don't know, the Netherlands, that probably is not going to be of interest to them, and the minimum is going to be 100 million of the project value, plus the projects need to have the appropriate collateral, which is usually, again, it depends on the lender, but without the collateral, it's just they're not even going to look at that, because that's the way the capital operates. But you are spot on about this, and they will look at that, because it's purely, when you look at this from the purely business point of view, the financial point of view, if you are the lender and if you want the project to succeed, because they want the projects to succeed, they really do. Because everybody benefits, and not just financially, it's the contribution to the economic, to the infrastructure, to generally to the human kind, like we mentioned before, the shelter, when they are building actually real estate. And so it's just, if they put in the money into something that is just unstable and may not produce results, that would be going into waste. And these days in particular, I think, I had an inquiry from the project owners, again, without disclosing any details. The project was located in one of the Russian territories, and the project owners themselves had basically come, originate from this particular area. The project is brilliant. It would be absolutely, a smooth ride with what they have and what they want to do, because it's really nicely done, and the roadmap for the project is there, and it would contribute to the economic situation. But the lender said no. the minute they saw it with the location of the facilities, of the manufacturing facilities, they said no. And it just happened. There was before the war with the Ukraine, where obviously these connections come from, like, you know, you've got your connections, I've got my family connections and friendships across different areas of the globe. And that's where it came from. Maybe without the current situation in the Ukraine, that I would look at it completely differently. But that was just a very, very, very short, quick response. That it was a flat no. So yes.
So do you then see then, you know, based on what you just said, do you see more capital deployment in a post, you know, Russia-Ukrainian conflict concentrated in that part of the world, should they come to some sort of terms? Do you see a lot of capital going there, or do you see some measure of restraint, like a wait and see approach?
Well, so I think it really depends. I mean, the thing that just came to my mind when you mentioned this, it was I think it was maybe 5-7 years ago when I had a conversation with the there was the HSBC Bank and a private lending. So they focus on customers with, I believe, 5 million and above. They serve this group of customers, and we were having this conversation, and it just, and he just mentioned that the situation that they had, and that's about, money laundering regulations, etc. Because the situation that they had was that basically a pool of investors from Russia purchased one of the buildings in a prime central location in London. And there was a few investors, and within weeks from basically that purchase, all of the investors except one were killed in various the situations. So that was the example of where the money which that they ended up with owning one of the key buildings on one of the key streets in London for a large sum of money, and that went into the hands that normally the bank would want to have them, or the society wouldn't want to have them, because that's not the money which is given what happened to the investors, right? Investors, we don't know if these people were actually investors or what happened. But what I want to say is that within this area, and so, I come from Poland, so we have Poland and Russia has a really long history. But to my knowledge, that within this area you've got, I mean, not just to my knowledge, that you've got the people like Mr. Abramovich, and that's the really big money, and that's the money who's been deployed actually from Russia to the West, and that's why the West kind of wanted to regulate it, because it did happen to me at some point. It was probably 2-3 years ago when I got the inquiries from companies serving those this particular area, and the request was literally just so that I would take the whole responsibility, find the investment, but would never know who the investors are. And the investors were allegedly from the Russian elites, government elites. And obviously, with this is a no-go, because, that is just the returns and the profits of it were very attractive. But obviously, knowing these things, that you need to be aware that, you just become a target, and, to deliver on that and to work with people you don't even know who those people are, that is just that is very, very unwise. Now, back to today. So there is a lot of money that would that the investors would want to move from this area to the west to other areas, and that's similar with China. I remember that when I worked at Barratt Homes, that basically we had customers who wanted to take money out of China and to purchase properties, and that some of those purchases were basically, it's just like they were parking money. Some of the investors were parking money. They didn't have any yield, any return on those properties. They would buy the properties like the whole block of flats for 10 million or a villa for 2 million. That was in Cambridge, so that I'm talking the Cambridge prices from a few years ago. But still, if you just purchase a block of flats, or if you purchase a villa and it's standing there empty, it's literally it's not doing anything apart from the fact that you have put the money in and took it out from China to what is considered a safer location. And London and the UK generally has always been perceived like that. And London in particular, for the investors who are looking at for the luxury property or for the higher end stock, because it's the safe investment. It's always been perceived like that. So when it comes to capital, the capital that I work with, that's the capital from not from Russia. That is, they don't work with that. None of the lenders. They have probably a different structures, but. One of the lenders is one of the biggest companies in China, is Sure, they've got really trillions to invest. And then again, it could be shaky these days. So, my focus there, where we come into play, we focus on the lenders who have been in place for years, and they've got the track records, and and they've got the processes and systems. You don't have this with the Chinese pool of investors unless they are part of the lender that I work with, and I know that they are. So I don't think this capital means things in this way, or are we going to invest in Russia or these areas? I cannot really comment on that, because they will look because it will depend on the generally on the global economics, how things are going to
normalize or not
develop after the war. But so I don't think they are thinking about in terms of the long term, because some of the lenders are going to be focused on specific areas and they will not consider other areas. And some of the lenders are going to be open, and but look at the government levels, at the really political official levels, like the pipeline that was basically built, kind of Germany and Russian collaboration. The pipeline that was blew up. I forgot Nord Stream 2, right? A few months ago. So, these projects, you really cannot tell. I wouldn't be, I don't have a crystal ball. I can only tell you what they will look at right now. And within the current situation, that would be a flat no, yeah.
So that's interesting, because, I spent many years in Germany, and one of the things that jumped out at me was there was a similarity in terms of London real estate and German vineyard. Many of the vineyards in Germany now are actually no longer owned by Germans.
Really?
So you have, a lot of Chinese investors plugging money into those vineyards. It's interesting, because I think I was in Beijing a few years back, and there was a very, very profound wine culture. And a lot of those wines are actually German wines. So you see a lot of that investment going into it's still tied to real estate, because a vineyard, is actually real estate, and it holds value, a lot longer than just a normal, apartment building or what have you. So, and that's leading me to my next point of discussion, which is, do you then believe that when infrastructure is deployed, regardless of where in the world. An investor is looking at their thesis going, okay, this may be a worthwhile investment. Let's do that investment. Is it usually with a view to turn it over, whether it's to have another developer acquire that investment or because we want to increase value, right? So our investors in infrastructure projects invest in predominantly with a view to either get into an M&A, acquisition, sale, with a view to an exit event, or depending on their investment thesis, they do it with a view to adding value added to the community, to the economy, to the project, for whatever sociocultural or moral reason that drives their thesis.
Right. I think it's a great point, and some of the family, if you look at the reports on the family offices, and